It's 6:30 on Monday, July 11th, and this is the Planning and Development Council of the town of Oakville. Madam Clerk, as I understand it, we have regrets from Councillor Dudek. Are there any others?
No, there are no other regrets.
All right, thank you very much. Council, it's time to declare pecuniary interests, if any, on the agenda. Madam Clerk, I don't see any declarations, so I'm going to take it that there aren't any. It would now be in order for two of us to move and second resolving into committee of the whole. Councillor Longo and Councillor Grant, thank you for that. Any objection? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, the motion carries, and we are now in our relaxed rule state that we use for planning matters, planning and development matters, possibly from time immemorial here in Oakville. Council, we have two confidential items on the agenda. There's a recommendation report for the draft plan of condominium for 1290 Spears Road, and there is an implementation of Bill 109 bylaw, and we have staff standing by if you have questions and don't regard them as consent, but otherwise, Councillor Adams?
I'll move them.
Councillor Adams, thank you for the motion. Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel? Councillor, whatever you said, we didn't hear.
I'm sorry. I'd like to separate out 4.2. I have a few questions on the site plan.
All right. Is
Sorry,
there any
Your
objection
Worship, just to clarify,
the...
you had said confidential items, but I believe you meant consent items. I just wanted to clarify that.
I hope I said consent. I certainly meant to say consent, and it actually says consent on the page in front of me. So thank you for the correction if I indeed said confidential. I know I was thinking there is no confidential consent item. Is there any objection to the motion for item 4.1? There being none, that's carried. And Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel, you have the floor for your questions about 4.2.
Thanks very much. My question is just in terms of clarifying what is meant by brought to council early. So I understand council would no longer have the authority based on the provincial changes, but are we talking about seeing a site plan application within, within a month of it arriving? I understand it won't be complete, studies may not be done, but what is the spirit and intent of that section in the report?
Well, let's turn to the town solicitor, Jennifer Huckwith. And Ms. Huckwith?
So the thought was that we would bring a report to council as soon as possible so that we would be trying to meet the 60-day deadline for processing. There would be a site plan, there would be their studies, there might be preliminary comments. So within the, say, 45-day range, it may go beyond that, in which case you will start to have fee deductions. But as soon as there's something worth saying, it will not be complete.
Okay, so thank you for that. So further to that then, so we'll be allowed to comment on it. Will the public be advised through the agenda that it is on the agenda, or will it be put through, like, can you just maybe give me a little more detail? I understand we don't, we're only going to be commenting, but the public may want to comment if it's coming to council for consideration. So will it be on the agenda? Will it be, how will it be laid out?
These things are all works in progress, as you may understand. It would be on the agenda, public agenda. Members of the public could comment. The thought was that we would run it similar to what had been provided for site plans, which had been brought to council before, that we would notify people in the immediate area, plus local residents associations, and run something similar to what had been done before when site plans were brought to council.
Okay, so I understand it's a work in progress. Will the website be updated shortly to identify this change? And in particular, will that change speak to who they direct their comments to, given council doesn't have the authority on this matter any longer?
So I'm not quite sure what you intend by that question, because the website doesn't indicate who you provide comments to other than a staff member anyway for site plan applications, which have been posted to the town's website. It gives a staff contact for it. That would continue to be the practice, that there would be a staff contact for the planner to direct comments, which would then be taken to the director as decision maker. For these particular applications, comments would initially come to the staff members anyway. If the applications come in and they're setting up the web pages for those particular applications, planning staff can try to remember to put a note that it will be coming to council, but people would likely receive the notice that it was coming to council within the same time frame. So, but if that is a concern, then it can be noted as something to be addressed.
I'd like it noted to be addressed, because while not every application would necessarily need or wanted to be brought to council, people have an expectation of being heard. And I like the idea that they have the opportunity to share with us and share with the director in a more formal manner their concerns. But as well, I think the website does need to indicate that there has been a fundamental shift. Because people do perceive we would have that authority. So if my comments could be noted, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Burton. Yeah, with regard to this change, you know, where if we don't get it, if it's not granted in 60 days, we lose 50%. If it's not granted 90 days, we lose 75%. And after 120 days, we don't get any fees. What's our track record on this type of application? How have we been doing? Are we meeting the 60 days in many cases, or how much money are we looking at losing in this case?
So I would say that you're not quite going to be comparing like apples to apples. There's some changes under the process with respect to complete applications. So there may be some and pre-consultation. So the materials submitted may be of higher quality, but typically it takes far longer than 30 days or 60 days to process a site plan application. And those are comments which were forwarded by many municipalities, including this municipality, when the legislation was passed.
So Jennifer, sorry. So right now we're not meeting even 60 days very often, but you're saying now when it comes in, we can say it's not complete and in fact go out and then they can't do anything about it?
So similar to zoning bylaws, it will be a matter of whether they have submitted studies with the correct information in it, the type of information. It's not the quality of the study, it's whether there is a traffic study that's submitted. We don't necessarily agree with the conclusions, but that information, like the pre-consultation process where staff look at applications, review them on a very preliminary basis before they're submitted, and provide comments as to matters they want to see in the studies which are submitted, should improve the quality of submissions. Whether it improves it enough is a matter to be seen. And the time frame for which they can file an appeal has been extended from 30 days to 60 days. And that's when the fee reductions start to kick in. So Mr. Charles and his staff are working to determine how they can best implement the new rules and work with these applications to minimize any fee loss or prevent it. But it is very tight timelines which have been imposed by the province.
So under the current guidelines, what would our fee loss be? Are we meeting 120 days? And have we been meeting 120 days in most cases?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I can. There are some applications which we have been able to meet that particular time frame. The majority of applications, though, do extend well past the 120 days. Our intent, as Ms. Huskwith was referring, is to look at our overall site plan process with respect to Bill 109 to ensure that we are not going to be in situations where we are not able to retain those funds. That process is something that we're working through over the next few months so that we have something in place prior to January 1st.
Gabe, do we need more staff? Like, is that what we require in order not to be giving money away?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't know that it's necessarily a question of staffing at this point. There's a number of things that we need to look at to ensure that our process is as efficient as possible. Following that, if there's other things that we need to look into, then we'll have to come back to council if that is in fact the case.
I thank you. Boy, this
through
is going
you.
to be interesting.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you will also see an increase in the number of conditional approvals that impose things through the conditions that set out what an applicant needs to fix in order to get to final approval. So it's less likely that approvals will be granted with all the I's dotted and T's crossed. We will be pointing to I's and T's, which are undotted or uncrossed, as we give the approvals. So that tool will be used to minimize any chance of fee loss.
Thank you for that.
Councillor O'Meara, perhaps you have a sticky unmute button, or I did. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to ask a question here. Thank you, Your Worship. I guess my question comes just off of the conversation there. At what point does council get to direct staff and director of planning what T's need to be crossed and what I's need to be dotted in this? I mean, what is our role in terms of issuing the director of planning the marching orders with regards to what he or she needs to do? And I guess, how does that work? Because there are many a times that us as councillors bring stuff up at site plan to the planning department and they go, oh yeah, that's a great idea, we should do that. I mean, where are the set of instructions, directions that we're going to be giving to our director of planning so that they understand all of our concerns and our residents' concerns with regards to site plan?
So as you are aware, councillors, site plan is designed as a technical review of implementation details rather than like political discretion. However, when you are doing the rezonings, there's typically a number of comments which members of council or members of the public make, which are indicated that that will be dealt with at site plan. Those comments will need to be stored. They generally are stored by the planner in their notes as two matters to be addressed. The planning director will work through matters. You will be advised that an application is present in your ward and you can provide comments as a filter through it. You don't provide direction, as I'd indicated in the report. The decisions must be based on professional judgment, professional information. So it is not a council-directed decision. Council's specifically been taken out of the process, but that doesn't stop you from passing on information or concerns.
Well, I appreciate that then. I guess my question is, can we have a council workshop then before this goes through and have every single member of council work with our planning department and understand exactly what is included in site plan and have that publicly available that we can share with our residents as well, so we can all be on the same page with regards to what site plan is? Because most people right now think site plan is another opportunity to stop a development. And I would really appreciate the opportunity to have a fulsome discussion on what exactly site plan is and what our role is, rather than talking in sort of a higher level here.
Councillor, I will answer your question. Yes, we will have such a workshop. And as a footnote to that answer, it has never been legally possible through site plan to stop a development. So we'd be happy to have a recorded workshop that the public can view after and even participate in. I don't see why the public can't attend in fact, the public can attend workshops if we want. Councillor Haslett-Deal.
Thank you very much. I think the workshop is a great idea. And I also think that this implementation by the province, which we basically have to agree with, is a further sign that we need to make our zoning a higher priority to fix those zoning permissions that are not currently do require revision and assessment.
Thank you for that, Councillor. The item has been moved by Councillor Adams. Is there any objection to the motion? Councillor, your hand's up. Are you? No, you're not. Okay. So, Madam Clerk, there's no objection, and the motion carries. Thank you, everybody. We now come to the first public hearing item for this meeting. This is the public meeting and recommendation report for the Halton District School Board zoning bylaw amendment. And if there's anyone watching the live stream of this meeting on oakville.ca who wishes to speak to this item, just call 905-815-6095 and we will connect you to the meeting. You'll be called upon to speak following the registered delegations. Council, we have a registered delegation in the person of Frederick Thibault from the Halton District School Board. And I believe that is it true, Councillor Adams, that you want to speak to this before we go anywhere?
The only thing I wanted to ask our staff and perhaps the delegation about was the availability of bicycle parking on the site. There's been a lot of discussion behind the scenes with respect to the parking management and transportation on this particular file. And generally, I think we're satisfied with the item as it is. I just wanted to get some clarification on the bicycle parking issue.
All right. Well, Madam Clerk, can you bring Mr. Thibault in to the meeting so that he can answer the councillor? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. And if that doesn't work, we have Lee Musson standing by, and she may be able to update us.
He's coming in.
He's coming in.
Oh, there he is.
There he is. Welcome, Mr. Thibault. Were you able to hear Councillor Adams' question?
Was your worship. So I'll answer quickly through you to Councillor Adams. The answer is yes, we will be in a position to provide additional bicycle parking on site. So we've already discussed this with Lee with regards to our future site plan application, and our intent is to provide some additional parking. And of note too is that as we typically go through these site plans, we don't stop it there. If we start seeing a need and the administration of those schools contact us, we're typically out there and adding bike parking just to accommodate the needs on site, because we do understand when there is a want, we certainly want to be accommodating for the school community.
Thank you very much for such a clear and crisp answer. Councillor Adams, do you have any other?
I do. Thank you very much for that clarification, and I'm happy for it to work its way through the site plan process. Could you provide any clarity on the ability to provide shelter to the bike parking? That's one thing I've noticed, is that the bike parking that we have often at schools is just in the open, and in a couple of cases I saw it basically just in a field. And so I wondered what kind of availability there might be at this location for that.
Through you, your worship, to Councillor Adams, it's certainly something we can look at and work with town staff at the site plan level to see where there might be. I'd say and go through that process to see if there's opportunities for that type of parking space. And in newer builds, we tend to try to strategically place the bike parking. So to your point, they're not necessarily in a field, which is the case in some of our older schools, or some schools that we may not have accounted for it earlier on. So certainly something we'll look at.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the discussions that we've had. I appreciate your efforts on it. I think the design that you're working towards here is a good one, and hopefully as the community builds up around it, it successfully manages its way through the boom cycle that always happens with new schools, and we can get to a happy place early on in the timing of this school.
Thank you. Council, we have no other delegations. Do any of you have questions? And if you haven't, I'll look to Councillor Adams for the indicated motion. Councillor Adams?
I'd be happy to move the recommendation, and I look forward to the process moving forward and a successful completion of a school.
Thank you. Any objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, that carries. And that brings us to 6.2, the public meeting and recommendation report for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for Graywood Developments at 2365 and 2377 Lakeshore Road West. We have a presentation from Kate Coburn, our senior planner. We have registered delegations, and for the public's benefit, participants are welcome to phone 905-815-6095 if you want to speak to the item, and we'll connect you to the meeting after, and you'll be called upon to speak following the registered delegations, of whom we have 5. Now, I just say for the public's benefit, this is a refusal recommendation, if that's not too internally contradictory. But basically, the recommendation report from staff is to refuse this application for the reasons listed very clearly in the report. Ms. Coburn is our senior planner, and she now has our full attention.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This evening, an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications are before you. They've been submitted by MHBC Planning on behalf of their client, Graywood Developments. The proposal relates to the development of lands for a 9-story mixed-use building, and it can be found on tonight's agenda as item 6.2. As stated, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to introduce the application to council and the public, but also to make a decision on this application. The applicant had held a virtual public information meeting in December of 2021, and prior to the meeting tonight, staff have received many letters of objection. The property is comprised of 3 lots and is known municipally as 2365 to 2377 Lakeshore Road West. It's found on the north side of Lakeshore Road West between Jones Street and Nelson Street. The property abuts 1- and 2-story commercial uses to the east and west. To the north of the property, there is a town-owned land which is used for stormwater management purposes, and beyond that, there are detached residential uses which have frontage onto Sovereign Street. To the south, there are mixed-use developments of 3 and 4 stories. The applicant proposes a 9-story mixed-use building which would have 180 residential units, including 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units, 673 square meters of commercial area on the ground floor, 2 levels of underground parking, and a dog run in the northeast corner of the site. The property is located within the Bronte Village growth area and is designated Main Street 1 bonusing. Bronte Village is identified as a secondary growth node in the Region of Halton official plan, and while it's intended to accommodate growth for the town, it is anticipated that a lower degree of growth would be accommodated in a secondary node rather than in a primary growth node, which is generally serviced by higher order transit corridors. The official plan provides a development concept which is supported by a policy framework for new development within Bronte Village, and this was recently amended through Official Plan Amendment 18 and further recognized by the Regional Official Plan Amendment 48. The site is located in the centermost area of the Village Main Street District, away from gateway locations, which are found at Bronte Road and Lakeshore, and East Street and Lakeshore, where the permitted height is 6 stories or up to 10 stories with bonusing. For this site, the maximum permitted building height is 4 stories, with the possibility of 6 stories with bonusing at council's discretion. It's staff's opinion that the 9-story development has not been designed to respond to the development objectives for Bronte Village contained within the Livable Oakville official plan or the design direction identified in the Livable by Design Urban Design Manual. the proposed height and the resulting degree of intensification is more in line with a gateway location or the objectives of the primary regional nodes rather than a secondary regional node. The property is zoned MU1, Mixed Use 1, Holding Provision 1. And this existing zoning permits a mixed-use building to a maximum height of 4 stories. Based on the proposed development, a cursory review of the zoning bylaw demonstrated that 199 parking spaces and a minimum rear yard setback of 3 meters would be required in addition to other setbacks and minimum separation distances for main wall proportionality on Lakeshore Road, balconies, and minimum landscaping. The applicant is proposing to modify the MU1 zone to permit a reduction in parking to 161 spaces and an increase in height to 9 stories. The other deficiencies with the zoning bylaw that were identified by staff were not addressed by the applicant's proposed bylaw, which is included in Appendix A of the staff report. It's noted that the holding provision that's applicable, the H1, is not proposed for removal at this stage. The requested 9 stories in height is more in line with height permissions of the MU3 or MU4 zones, which would permit maximum heights of 8 and 12 stories respectively, which would suggest a complete change in the zoning category from MU1 to MU3 or 4, rather than the modifications that they have proposed. It is staff's opinion that the cumulative effect of the proposed zoning modifications results in an over-intensification and contributes to a development that does not adequately reflect the scale of development planned for Bronte Village. In conclusion, Your Worship, staff put forward the following recommendation for Council's consideration. The additional comments received tonight will also form part of the record. Technical aspects of the proposal, such as urban design, stormwater management, transportation, waste management, and parking, have not been sufficiently addressed to demonstrate that the development on the subject lands will achieve the goals and objectives of the growth area. It is staff's opinion that the application does not appear to sufficiently address the matters of provincial interest, the provincial policy statement, the growth plan, the Region of Halton official plan, or the Livable Oakville official plan, and results in a development that does not reflect the existing and planned characteristics of Bronte Village. On this basis, and for the reasons provided in the staff report, staff recommends refusal of this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Coburn. You have generated some questions from certain councillors. Councillor O'Meara first, and then Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Your Worship. My first question is, is the developer or its agent on going to speak tonight? Do we know if they're delegated to speak?
He's a registered delegation, sir.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Then my question to staff is, at any point did the developer or the applicant listen to staff's comments and change their development at all with regards to our suggestions or our recommendations?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, as indicated in the staff report, a pre-consultation meeting was held in which staff had provided some feedback. And through the review of the application, a comment report was provided to the applicant, which remained fairly consistent with respect to the comments and concerns with this proposal. So the applicant has been made aware of staff's concerns.
So the polite way of saying that then, what you just said is you raised concerns and the applicant did not change anything after hearing those concerns. Is that a correct assumption?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm happy to sit back on that, and I know my council colleague Beth Robertson will be happy to move the recommendation at the appropriate time. So I'll sit back here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Robertson, your turn.
Thank you. This is a great report. It really got into the things that we saw are wrong in terms of the way the village should be growing. We know the village is going to grow, but it is a great way to say there are places that are appropriate, a gateway versus a Main Street piece. The other thing, besides the parking and the number of stories, that I wanted to note in terms of denial to me was that it had a huge lack of retail space. I mean, there is retail space, but it's so important as being on our main street to have a great piece of retail. And because it's set out to the street, there's no room for anything. There's no room for patio. There's no room for anything in the process. So I just wanted to add that to the list of why we should deny.
Well, thank you, Councillor. I'll accept your motion to approve the refusal recommendation if there are no other comments. And now that that's on the floor, Council, we need to turn to our registered delegations and hear them out and see what else they might add to the picture. Madam Clerk, would you call the first registered delegation?
The first delegation is Brad Hallowell.
Welcome, Mr. Hollowell. Council looks forward to your information. And Council did receive your detailed letter, and we've all read it.
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, I think they got my name wrong. I'm Brad Mull.
Oh. Madam Clerk.
Hello, can anybody hear me?
Good evening, it's Brad Hollowell here, if you can hear me.
We can hear Brad Hallowell and someone else. But Mr. Hallowell, you're the one we're recognizing and we're waiting to hear from.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brad Hollowell, and I'm the owner of 2351 Lakeshore Road West, Unit 5. So I'm here this evening to make submissions for the sole purpose of opposing the application by Greywood Bronte Village LP for the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment at 2365 to 2377 Lakeshore Road West. I'll be referring to that area as the subject lands. And that application is to permit, as Ms. Coburn mentioned, a 9-story mixed-use building with 180 residential units, 673 square meters of commercial space at grade, and 2 levels of underground parking. I've lived in Bronte now for 2 years, and I'm not here tonight to seek special or differential treatment due to my close proximity to the subject lands. Rather, I'm here to ask the town of Oakville to make a decision that's consistent with the livable Oakville plan, as well as a decision that is consistent with this specific area of Bronte. I realize that Ms. Coburn has already touched on a few of the points, but I've taken the time to put together a bit of a brief presentation here, so I'd like to go through it for you. Next slide, please. So the application and the proposed development of the subject lands does not conform with and is not consistent with the current residential and mixed-use residential properties in the area immediately surrounding the subject lands. Moreover, the application is not consistent with the livable Oakville plan. On this basis, is my submissions that the application should be denied for 3 reasons. Number 1, the proposed building type on the subject lands, a large tower. Number 2, the height of the building being 9 stories. And number 3, the density of the residential component of the building, which is 180 residential units. Next slide, please. So the type of the building, next slide. The application proposes a 9-story mixed-use building on the subject lands, which are located in an area designated Main Street 1 in Schedule P1 of the Livable Oakville Plan. And I've included a copy of it here, and I know Ms. Coburn has also referenced the specific site. Next slide, please. The application is not consistent with the objectives for Bronte, as cited in Section 24, Sub 2, Sub 1 of the Livable Oakville Plan, which include A, promoting predominantly low-rise and pedestrian-oriented built along Lakeshore Road West from Bronte Road and Jones Road, and ensuring high-quality urban design that complements and contributes to the historic Lakeside Village character. The Livable Oakville Plan defines Main Street 1 as mixed-scale, mixed-use development along main streets and is intended to reflect a pedestrian-oriented historic Main Street character. It is my submission that this 9-story mixed-use tower, as proposed in the application, is neither small scale, nor does it preserve the historic Main Street character. For these reasons alone, the application should not be approved. Next slide, please. I'd like to also touch on the height of the building. Next slide, please. The application is for a 9-story building, and that violates the maximum 4-story building height restrictions for Main Street 1 as set out in section 12 sub 2 sub 2 of the livable Oakville plan. And that provision provides that buildings within Main Street 1 designation shall be a minimum of 2 stories in height and a maximum of 4 stories in height. Next slide, please. Although the subject lands are eligible for bonusing, as Ms. Coburn has mentioned, section 24 sub 8 sub 2 of the livable Oakville plan provides that public benefits which can be considered appropriate for increased height in Bronte Village may include, but are not limited to, and there's several criteria. Number 1, improved local transit service and transit user amenities. 2, affordable housing. 3, public parking facilities. 4, streetscape enhancements. 5, cultural heritage conservation enhancements. 6, parkland improvements beyond the minimum standards for public squares. And 7, public art. The application does not meet any of these criteria to be eligible for bonusing. Number 1, it does not improve local transit service. And in fact, the density will increase an already problematic stretch of Lakeshore Road West. That area during rush hour is already quite congested. And as you are aware, there's no ability in that area to widen Lakeshore Road as the current mixed-use towns go directly to the sidewalks. The residents of units 4 to 7, 2, 3, 5, 1 Lakeshore Road West have a difficult time accessing Lakeshore Road West currently in rush hour, as the only way to get onto Lakeshore Road West is from that one point of entry. Number 2, if the goal is to create affordable housing, that can be accomplished through affordable low-rise building or a group of townhomes or mixed-use townhomes. Number 3, there's already significant community parking and street parking. Number 4, the proposed streetscape will not meet Bronte's objective of a historic lakeside village character. Number 5, there is no conserving of cultural heritage. Number 6, there is no parkland improvement. And number 7, there is no appeal to public art. Next slide, please. Furthermore, a 9-story tower is not consistent with the mixed use and residential townhomes in the immediate vicinity of the subject lands. Directly to the east of the subject lands at 2351 Lakeshore Road West, there's a complex of mixed use 3-story townhomes, which I've set out here and labeled as figure 2. These are units 1 to 3. And then behind those, next slide, please. Behind those, there's an additional 4 townhomes, which are 3 4-story townhomes, and those are located, as I said, right behind units 1 to 3, and can only be accessed from Lakeshore Road West. Next slide, please. Similarly, directly south of the subject lands from 2334 to 2364 Lakeshore Road West, there's also mixed-use 3-story townhomes. And in Figure 4, I've shown an example. Next slide, please. In Figure 5, from 2354 to 2364 Lakeshore Road West, there's another example of what's in the area. Next slide. And this is the artist's rendering of what the proposed development on the subject lands will look like. And as you can see, it does not conform with and is not consistent with those 3-story mixed-use towns that are directly beside and across from the development. Next slide, please. The density of the residential component. Next slide, please. Lastly, the application proposes 180 residential units. This density is not consistent with section 24 sub 4 sub 3 of the livable Oakville plan, which provides that a minimum plan density shall be established in Bronte Village through provincial conformity coordinated with Halton region. Should the application be approved, it will result in a high density of residents living in the subject lands, an area outside of Bronte's urban core that is not suited for this level of density. As I mentioned in the previous submissions, the traffic on Lakeshore Road West is already a significant problem. And should this application be approved, this problem will only be worsened. Next slide, please. In summary, I am not opposed to the development or revitalization of Bronte. In fact, I think it's a great idea. To be consistent with Oakville's vision of developing, the most livable town in Canada, I think it's a great idea. However, Bronte and specifically the subject lands should be developed in a way that is consistent with the livable Oakville plan and the objective of maintaining Bronte's historic lakeside village character. As I set out this evening, the proposed development of the subject lands is not consistent with the livable Oakville plan based on the type of building that is proposed. Number 2, based on the height of the building. And 3, based on the density of the residential component. The application does not conform with and is not consistent with the current townhomes and mixed-use townhomes in the area immediately around the subject lands. It's for these reasons that I kindly request that the application be denied. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity this evening to make these submissions.
Mr. Hallowell, thank you very much for the time you took to bring this information to council. Councilor O'Meara has a question for you, sir.
I do, thank you. Brad, firstly, I want to thank you for, having one of the most concise and articulate presentations that we've had in a very long time. It was very well thought out and put forward. I guess my question is, do you feel that you have been heard by the developer and that the developer heard your objectives and made any movement with regards to their proposal?
Thank you, Councillor. So in the earlier discussion with Ms. Coburn about the consultation back in December, I wasn't aware of that consultation. Perhaps I didn't receive the notice or didn't see it come through. So I haven't had any communications with the developer to date, but I'd be happy to do so if I was provided with the opportunity.
Well, thank you very much, Brad. And I'll tell you, you're not alone. As the councillor, Beth and myself, we've had the same conversation or lack of with the developer. So thank you very much for your comments and for your absolute, concise, and considerate presentation today. It was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, everybody. Madam Clerk, would you call the next registered delegation?
Next delegation is Thomas Blower.
Welcome, Mr.
Hello.
Bloor. Council looks forward to your information.
Thanks very much. Yes, I'd like to start, no doubt. I'm a resident on Southern Street, and I'm a long-time resident of Oakville. I would like to thank the previous respondent there for his very clear and very concise presentation. I do note the mayor's comments at the start where the official recommendation is to deny this. So I shall try to keep my comments to additional points that have not been made by the previous respondent to avoid too much time of the councillors on the meeting here. I think as a resident of Sovereign Street, I would like to note that we have not received any information or communication from the developer. It was only information from the city that has come through that we've seen and heard. I'd like to echo some of the comments about the current zoning and the fact that their development is basically double the height restriction for the zoning of that area. And although they refer to it as a 9-story, it's really a 9-story plus 1, which is the mechanical and the HVAC hutch on top of that building. Their submissions to council, specifically the submission relating to the planning justification report, actually deliberately and very clearly completely ignores the single family residences that are in fact the biggest properties that bound their area. They refer to Nelson Street to the north and Jones Street to the west, clearly ignoring the single family residential areas that is actually only zoned for a maximum building height of 10.5 meters immediately to the rear of the property. I would also reiterate the fact that they did not put any features into the development proposal that would actually make them eligible for bonusing from the city. And more importantly, I think the city should consider that if this is approved, then it opens the door for the precedent to be set that MU8 zoning would effectively have to allow 10-story buildings all the way along Lakeshore, effectively from Jones Street to east of East Street. This is going to fundamentally change the character of Bronte to give us effectively a very dark urban canyon along that section of Lakeshore, as opposed to the attractive area that is envisaged in the livable Oakville plan. Also, I would like to point out that the public consultation that the developer has included or mentioned in his submission to council was done with a very, very small number of people. Actually, I don't know anyone on Sovereign Street that was made aware of that or actually attended that. Although I have learned that that proposal at that time was actually only a 6-story development. So their comments from the public in their public consultation is fundamentally on a different scale of development than what they're actually proposing now. So I feel that they've kind of taken the opportunity to do somewhat of a bait and switch with the city on that. So there are a number of inconsistencies or misrepresentations, I would argue, in their submission to council. Another point I would like to make that I don't think has been made just yet is the layout of the lot actually puts the vehicle entrances to the building and the underground car parking at the rear, effectively right up close to that boundary of those single family homes on Sovereign Street. If you look at the traffic assessment report that the surveyor has provided, their own estimations say that at peak times, they expect around 95 vehicle movements in and out of that lot during weekday evenings. That's 95 per hour, or in more understandable terms, that would be about 1 car moving in and out about every 38 seconds. So effectively, they're proposing to build a pretty busy roadway right immediately adjacent to some existing single family homes. The other issue I think that the residents of Sovereign Street are very concerned around is effectively the under-provisioning of car parking spaces for the building. Sovereign Street, we already have a lot of pressure on parking ever since Farm Boy basically started ticketing and towing cars from their lot who were not using the Farm Boy grocery store. There is considerable public parking that goes on very often in the evenings and on weekends along Sovereign Street, and this building, and specifically the under provisioning of car parking spaces for this building, will only make the situation worse and increase the pressure on parking on Sovereign Street. It's a regular occurrence that residents on Sovereign Street have driveways blocked by cars that are parked on the road in the evenings, and we can't necessarily get in and out of our properties easily. So with that, I think without reiterating the points too much, I would like to thank the city or the council for their consideration, and please ask you that we deny this proposal as is.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bloor, for the time you took to share your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation, please.
The next delegation is Sajan Verma. She's there. There she comes.
Good evening, Madam Clerk, Mr. Mayor, councillors, and other attendees. Please let me know if it's possible as to whether or not you can hear me.
We can hear you very well, thank you.
Thank you kindly. Little background, I'm in Timmins, Ontario, camping with the family, so I do apologize if it's a bit spotty. We're quite rural. I won't take up any more time. I think my two neighbors summed it up to the point that I don't have anything more significant to add. I just want to reiterate those points, and I don't need to restate to do so. My wife and I own 2 homes on Sovereign Street, and my mother is our next door neighbor. So effectively our family has 3 on Sovereign, and the opposition that we hold toward this, and sort of generally this scale of development impacts us very significantly, as has been highlighted. And, I just want to add our collective voices to our neighbors as we share the same concerns. So I don't want to say it again, belabor anything. I have nothing new specifically to add. I just want to ensure that you understand that it's more than just these two eloquent neighbors that kindly presented prior to my wife and myself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Verma. We do understand that. And Councillor O'Meara would like to detain you for a question before you get back to camping in Timmins with your family. What a miracle of modern technology to have
So
you with us
excited.
tonight.
I appreciate it. I know you're busy, but I have two questions. First of all, how do you feel with regards to the public input in this process? And how do you feel your voice has been heard with regards to what the proposal is and what they have or have not done based upon your input?
If it wasn't for my neighbors and yourself, Councillor O'Meara, we would not have been notified. I didn't see anything that was significant, like as in other projects. It's just not an area that I find that there's already a lot of grass where I can take our dog to relieve herself. So the signage, wasn't noted. I've seen no contact. The research started after our community discussions occurred, and you're part, obviously, of our neighborhood. So I'm disappointed on that side of the fence. And like our first neighbor, not opposed to development, but this is certainly incongruent with the type of development in the neighborhood that we've invested, well, literally all of our life savings in. We have 3 houses on the street. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. It does. And it actually answers both of my questions. My other one was whether you're opposed or not to development, and you answered that as well. So it's not necessarily anti-development. It's just, this development in particular is a bit of an issue for you. And I appreciate you're taking your time away from your family and your lifestyle time to chime in here, because that makes a better community. So thank you very much for that.
No, you do a lot for us, Councillor O'Meara. We appreciate that. So you go out of your way even when you're with your family. So no need to thank for us to sort of at least stick together and try and keep the community a safe and viable one. And that's sort of the focus. Development definitely needs to happen. There's a lot of buildings that need to either be completely refurbished or repurposed or even rebuilt. But this is, as has been highlighted, so inconsistent with that which exists and that which we invested to buy in the neighborhood of. Was a little bit shocked when we delved deeper within the group of our neighborhood. So
thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Verma, and best of wishes for your camping trip. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
Next delegation is John McNeese.
Mr. McNeese, we can see you, and the picture says you're not muted, so please begin.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I'm echoing what's in the staff report and what the concerned neighbors have outlined already, but I just want to emphasize a few points. So good evening, Your Worship, councillors, staff, and community members. My name is Jonathan McNeese. I have a background in urban planning, and I'm a property owner on Marine Drive. And I'm here today to talk about the proposed development at 2365 to 2377 Lakeshore Road West in Bronte. I agree with many of the elements, if not all, in the staff report, and I'd like to thank staff for conducting this thorough report in the 120-day time limit, which I know is tight. This really helps level the playing fields, especially for the community to be involved in the decision-making process and for us to have a strong voice. Please allow me to emphasize 3 points from the report. First is that this is not a gateway site. It's not appropriate. I don't think this building is appropriate for mid-block. It would set a dangerous precedence for all the other mid-block sites along Lakeshore Road, and it surely lead to more developments of this size and scale along Lakeshore Road West. Also, it's submitted as a 9-story building. 9 stories in modern day height is typically about 10 to 15% higher than what we expect, because they typically have higher floor heights or ceiling heights in the commercial space, as well as many buildings offer 9 and 10-story ceiling heights in the residential space. In this case, it's proposed at 29.7 meters, which is close to 100 feet. So it would look like or be comparable to a standard 10-story building, and then have amenity space or mechanical space on top as well. Secondly, I agree that the character of the proposed building does not represent the historic nature of Bronte Village. It continues to detract from it, which is putting Bronte on a path to losing its identity and sense of place with more buildings of this nature. Additionally, number 3, I would agree that the 161 proposed parking spaces and not the requisite 199 parking spaces that staff has suggested would be a big concern. Where would the extra 38 cars go? I think we know, not to mention that 14 of the spaces that they're providing are listed as shared spaces. So those are for commercial and visitor combined. We know through experience that visitors typically don't use the commercial space that's in underground parking. So, we have a predatory towing problem and other parking issues. And I think a lot of it stems from these commercial spaces not having adequate parking on site. So finally, I'd like to add that the proposed retail space, it really needs to be vibrant. Where the building meets the street needs more attention for an enhanced pedestrian experience. And I would suggest that if the applicant wishes to pursue this further, he engage with local residents and businesses to co-design it. So it's something that the community wants and that local retailers could use. And this actually happened with the Amica building on Bronte Road. While it's not retail space, there was a co-design process of many sessions so that they could have some aesthetics that the neighborhood desired. So in conclusion, I would ask that council accept the staff recommendation and vote to deny the application as submitted. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. McNeice, for the time you took to bring your information to council. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation, please?
We have one phone-in delegation, Brad DeMoyle.
Mr. DeMoyle, welcome. Mr. DeMoyle, you're on mute, I think. Mr. DeMoyle, we can see that you're in the participant list, but it says that your audio is muted. If you're using your telephone, I'm told that *6 might unmute you. All right. Mr. Demal, we're going to proceed to the next delegation, and we will come back to you, hoping that you've solved your mute problem by then. Madam Clerk, the next delegation, please.
The next delegation is Oz Kamal from MHBC Planning.
Mr. Kamal, we can see you very well, and I think we can hear you.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. I just want to make sure audio is good.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I do have a presentation that I'd like to go through. Thank you for bringing that up. So good evening. Welcome to the public meeting and recommendation report for the proposed development at 2365 to 2377 Lakeshore Road West. My name is Oz Kamal from MHBC Planning, and I'm here on behalf of our client, Greywood Developments, and we will be providing a presentation to inform the public on the proposal and supporting applications submitted for the subject lands for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. Next slide, please. So what we're going to be doing is provide an overview of site and surrounding area context, planning context, and finally an overview of the proposal itself. Next slide, please. Next slide. So as Ms. Coburn had noted, the subject lands are a rectangular parcel located on the north side of Lakeshore Road West between Jones and Nelson in the Bronte growth area. The site has an approximate area of 3,740 square meters. The portion of the property at 2365 to 2373 Lakeshore Road West is currently occupied by 1 and 2 story buildings that support a number of small businesses with surface parking located at the front of the building. The portion of the property at 2377 to 2379 Lakeshore Road is currently vacant. That's on the west side of the air photo there in front of you. Next slide, please. As you can see from the image here, the site is currently underutilized, does not contribute to the vibrancy of the streetscape. As Lakeshore Road West evolves to become more mixed use and pedestrian oriented, this site we considered it an ideal opportunity to reimagine the pedestrian realm. Next slide, please. This figure here demonstrates the walkability of the site and is drawn to scale. The proposed development represents a true opportunity to revitalize an underutilized site in a truly walkable neighborhood. Subject lands are located along frequent transit routes and are within walking distance to a number of commercial, recreational, and employment uses. Future residents would have convenient options to utilize public transit or active transportation as an alternative to the car, thereby helping achieve reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. As shown on this figure, Lakeshore Road West is prominent within the Bronte growth area. Lakeshore Road West connects the Bronte growth area with surrounding neighborhoods in Oakville and is one of the town's principal streets. Bronte Road is also a minor arterial, which becomes a major arterial to the north and is one of the principal streets and organizing elements in Oakville. Next slide, please. As we had mentioned on a previous slide, the site has excellent transit connectivity. The site is well serviced by existing transit routes and facilities, including Oakville Transit Route 3, as well as 14 and 14A, with bus stops located just at the intersection of Lakeshore Road West and Nelson and Lakeshore Road West and Jones. These routes also provide service to the Bronte GO station and provides transit services from downtown Toronto to Aldershot GO. Next slide, please. We're going to talk about policy and regulatory framework now. Next slide, please. So the subject lands are designated as urban area per Map 1 regional structure and further designated as a secondary regional node per Map 1H of the regional urban structure, which is a strategic growth area in Halton region's urban structure. Regional nodes as a component of the regional urban structure were approved under the Regional Official Plan Amendment number 48 or ROPA 48 in November 2021. As a strategic growth area, these lands are intended to be the focus for redevelopment and mixed-use intensification in Halton region. The regional secondary node will accommodate increased unit densities, population growth, and a mix of housing. Although not in full force and effect at the time of this presentation, regional staff have also brought forward ROPA 49 for consideration. ROPA 49 would accommodate population and employment growth within Halton's existing urban boundaries to 2041. This would result in no urban boundary expansion. With no urban boundary expansion, there's even a greater emphasis on the fact that growth must be accommodated through density and intensification. Next slide, please. In the Oakville official plan, the subject lands are designated as growth area per Schedule F and Main Street 1 mixed use, and lands eligible for bonusing per Schedule P1 of the official plan. The official plan amendment would implement policy standards that support intensification directives from the province and region, as we were requesting a maximum height of 9 stories. Next slide, please. The subject lands are zoned at Main Street 1 with holding provision. Again, a zoning bylaw amendment will apply a site-specific exemption to the existing MU1 zone in order to address the following, which was maximum permitted height of 9 stories or 29.75 meters, excluding the mechanical penthouse, and then site-specific modifications to the required parking. Next slide, please. So, housing affordability. As part of this presentation, I wanted to look at this proposal from the perspective of housing affordability and supply, which is our main justifications for supporting the development. As many of you are aware, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation released a new report on June 23rd detailing that over 22 million housing units will be required across Canada to help achieve housing affordability in Canada. The report also stresses that business as usual development patterns will not do enough to address housing affordability. From a provincial perspective, as shown in the graph here, Ontario is and will continue to be the worst major province in terms of a positive housing stock to population ratio. It's the lower line and continuing to trend lower. Next slide, please. Housing supply in Bronte Village. Looking at the town of Oakville in particular, the town consistently ranks among the most expensive places in Ontario to buy a home due to low inventory. Therefore, the town should look to support additional housing growth, especially in its designated strategic growth areas such as Bronte. Despite the policy and regulatory framework designated Bronte as a place for growth and intensification, there's insufficient development occurring to address low housing inventory. And in the market assessment for growth areas that was completed on behalf of the town, encouragement is needed to attract development investment, especially through increased building heights. Therefore, we believe that the proposed amendments to the official plan and zoning bylaw are appropriate and consistent with accommodating growth in strategic growth areas. Next slide, please. Now we're going to talk about the proposal. Next slide. The proposed redevelopment represents an intensification of the subject lands and will serve to recognize its designation as a growth area and provide for appropriate development while respecting the transition from the low medium density development to the north. The proposal is a 9-story mid-rise building containing 673 square meters of retail space along Lakeshore, 180 residential condo units, and a total of 161 parking spaces. Subject lands will be accessed along Lakeshore Road West to the south by a 2-lane driveway along the easterly property line as shown in the figure. The building is designed to transition in height from the rear lot line adjacent to the town's servicing lands through building step back. So you can see how it steps back on the north as you continue south towards Lakeshore Road West. In addition, we're proposing streetscape improvements along Lakeshore Road West as well. A high standard of architectural excellence had been provided through an urban form that creates a distinctive street presence and promotes visually dynamic streetscape. Next slide, please. This is the first floor. So the ground floor of the building in the Main Street 1 designation shall be occupied by retail and service commercial uses. It's shown in green in the area on the plan in front of you. Again, we had showed 673 square meters of retail space. Within the site, we were also providing both indoor and outdoor amenity spaces to help enhance quality of life and support independence of residents. The indoor amenity area is shown in the light blue, while the outdoor amenity area is shown in the gray in the northeast quadrant, which was originally, we were thinking about doing a dog run. There are two entrances to the proposed building along Lakeshore Road West, and to provide retail entrances as well as a residential entrance. The placement of the entrances and doors will animate the streetscape and provide convenient access for pedestrians to the surrounding street network. The building's front, the lot area, encouraging activity and provides visual interest to the street level, active grade related uses, and by creating a rhythm of bays. Next slide, please. The proposal maintains compatibility and respects the existing and planned community context for appropriate massing transition through stepping and of the building massing, spatial separation, orientation, and site design. We recognize that the development is adjacent to existing low-rise residential uses to the north, so the proposal incorporates a transition of height as shown on this figure. So you can see on the north, it starts at 3 stories and works its way up to 9 stories along Lakeshore. Next slides, please. So these are just some renderings to show you how we were planning on looking at the building in the context of Bronte and animating the streetscape, as well as an aerial shot of how the building would look in Bronte. Next slide, please. As part of the application, shadow studies were submitted.
Mr. Kamal, your time has expired. Are you near the end of your presentation?
I'm at the very end. Thank you. And we showed shadow studies for as required per the town requirements. And what we had determined was that the proposed development does not exceed the 2 consecutive hour test times after 12 p.m. for any residential amenity space. Next slide. Thank you. If I could also, I know that there was a series of comments from the public and some from the councilors as well. If I could just maybe take a minute just to address some of those comments.
Mr. Kamal, in your place, I might have addressed those first.
In the
but
present.
why
No
don't
problem.
we?
I'll wait for questions. Thank you.
Councillor O'Meara is determined to give you an opportunity to speak with him, so I'm going to recognize him, and away you guys go. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you. Oz, thanks so much. If you'd please, if you wouldn't mind maybe just addressing some of the questions that you heard previously, and then I have a follow-up question.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor. One of the things I do want to note is we did have a pre-submission consultation with the public in December of 2021. From that, we did hear concerns about height, density. At that time, we were looking at the policies, we were looking at the regional policies and the provincial policies, and we were directing. It was leaning towards that. This is an area where the policies do need to be revisited for Bronte. And so what we did is, after we had that pre-meeting, we furthered our investigations, looked through things. And what we did is we submitted our application deemed complete in April. From April, we received our first round of comments in mid-June from town staff. And with the comments, we were told that we would be going forward to July 11th, which would be normally our public meeting, with a refusal report as well. So the normal course, I mean, I've been in front of this council many a time. The normal course would be I have a public meeting, we hear comments and feedback, we review the comments provided by town staff, we have an opportunity to make adjustments and try to address the comments. That's what this meeting is for, but unfortunately today it's a recommendation for refusal as well, which is why you don't see a change in the proposal. I hope that helps with some of the comments.
Thank you, Your Worship. Oz, I'll tell you, that was the biggest word salad I've heard from you in a very long time. I don't understand what you just said. I have heard from staff for 2 months that you and your clients refused to address any of the issues that they asked and begged your clients to address. So all that you just said, and you have a very great reputation in front of this council, and I give you all that due respect, but what you're advocating for right now and what your clients have asked you to do is, anyway, we'll leave it there. I want to ask you about in particular the retail square foot. So you're proposing 673 square foot of retail. Can you tell me right now what the current retail is along your owned property for both of them? Even though it's just a parking lot, what is the current allowable retail and retail area right there, right now on those properties?
The existing building?
No, on all of your properties. The parking lot where cars are being parked right now is zoned retail. The existing building is zoned retail. There's a square footage of retail right now that will not be retail if your development goes forward. So what is the existing retail right now in place on both properties?
Counselor, I wouldn't know the answer to that right now. I'm sorry.
So would I be out of line if I said you are at least eliminating half of the allowable retail space on our prime Lakeshore Road area to convert it to amenity and condo space? Am I out of line in saying?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor O'Meara, the way that we were proposing the retail on the floor plan had, I want to say, the majority of the lakeshore frontage as retail frontage. So it's hard for me to say that you were eliminating that much retail. I would have to review that and come back, but this isn't the opportunity to do that.
Fair enough. Is the development proposing amenity space for the condo development on Lakeshore Road?
No, there's commercial development along Lakeshore Road. There's a driveway on the east side, and then there's a residential lobby on the west side. The amenity space is on the interior within the site, not on Lakeshore Road.
Okay, so there is a lobby and retail spot and entrance on Lakeshore Road.
Correct.
Okay, so there is amenity space for the condo on Lakeshore Road.
With the lobby.
Yeah. Okay, we're going around in a little bit of circles here.
Sorry, not intended.
You're okay, Oz. You know what? I'm fine, Your Worship. I'll leave it there. I don't think I need to drag Oz through the rocks anymore. But I'll have my chance when we go to have a discussion on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Kamal, thank you for taking the time to come tonight and to bring us your presentation. Madam Clerk, are there any further delegations?
There is just Brad DeMol, who is still showing here, but maybe we want to ask if he can unmute.
He's still on mute, too. Mr. DeMol, are you able to unmute and participate?
I think I'm unmuted now. Can the town council hear me?
Yes, we can. Very well. Thank you. Thank you very much for solving that technical problem.
I'm not sure what it was. I was hitting *6. It just didn't disconnect the mute for whatever reason. But anyway, I think all my neighbors have covered things very well. I'm a neighbor of Thomas directly to his east on Sovereign Street at 2371. Also, I think that all the objections have been heard. I just want to second what everybody has said. Living on Sovereign Street, we have become a bit of a parking lot to some of the local businesses, restaurants, and things like that. Some of my sprinkler heads along my front of my grass there are a victim of it, actually. So I have the sign out front that says, "Please don't park on my grass." For that reason. But anyway, I'm concerned about the traffic the added traffic that's going to come through. Also, the height of the building. As I look out my front window right now, I would say that 9 stories, which will actually probably be 10 with the mechanical and everything else on the roof, would definitely be an eyesore to us as property owners on Sovereign Street. Not only that, but I'm concerned about the overall look of the town, Bronte Village. I don't think it conforms to it either. And also the shadow that it may cast on the green space north of us. basically our front lawns, our trees, our grass, everything else. So I just wanted to add that bit in, but I think everything else has been covered very well by the other Brad with his slide presentation, and I want to thank him for that.
Thank you very much. If I can call you Brad number 2.
Yeah, Brad number 2.
So we appreciate the time that you took to join us this evening. Madam Clerk,
Very much.
if that is the end of delegations, I'll confine the matter to table. The refusal recommendation has been duly moved by Councillor Beth Robertson. I plan to support her motion. I would just like to share with you a little bit of news that bears on my decision, and that is that the region has produced its annual State of Housing report. And it presents a very different story than what you can read in the CMHC report and other matters that seem to be ripped from the headlines of today's journalism that gives a different picture than what the region's report provides. And I'll just headline it this way. Oakville has exceeded Halton's new housing affordability targets. And I think there's a lot for us to look at in that report and to reflect on and to even be proud of. So, Councillor Romero?
Thank you, Your Worship. I do want to thank Councillor Robertson on this. She's put in yeoman's work and really, done a lot to try and bring some sort of conversation to the developer forward, which unfortunately has gone astray. In my 8 years, I have never had a lack of communication with the development proposal like I have with this, and it's shocking, it's awestruck, and our staff, and thank you very much, they go above and beyond to try and find a way to make things work. And they look at me and shake my head and they go, they just won't talk to us. They want what they want, and that's it. They won't deal with anything. And that's not how we work in Oakville. That's not how we work in Bronte. That's not how we work anywhere. We work together. And Councillor Robertson and I, sometimes we go to the wall when development proposals should be approved because it's the right thing to do. This is not the right thing to do. And I think that that her leadership and the work we've done and staff have done have really led to where we are. So I thank staff for that, and I would ask all my councillors to support the motion of refusal on this, because it's not the way that we work in our community, and it's not going to bring out the best in our community, and it certainly does nothing to add to the business element and Main Street element by turning it into amenity space for a condo ownership. So I thank you to my council colleagues, and Your Worship, I would ask for a recorded vote.
Councillor Robertson.
Thank you. I would like to add something to what Sean said. From our beginning with this developer, which was a brief meeting prior to the public consultation meeting, they proposed 6 stories. We were shocked at the December meeting that said 9 stories. They heard everyone then, and they said, we haven't put anything into the town. We're not doing that till March or April, and we're listening to you. And they didn't. So that's part of it. There's a piece in the report that bothers me in terms of the relationship we're developing with this developer right off. The applicant has included the town-owned block in its proposal as if it is its own property, as a means to justify a reduction in rear yard setback and accommodating a reduced spatial separation to the low-density residential uses to the north. In staff's opinion, it is inappropriate to attribute town lands that are not intended to be developed for uses included in the Main Street 1 designation within the scope of this proposal. I think that says a great deal about where we're at in terms of developing a relationship that works well, and what they see as being an opportunity for growth and then exploiting that opportunity completely. So I am thankful for everyone that has been part of this, and I hope to see better things come out for the neighbors, for the people that said, you know, if you let this happen, then the nature of Bronte this will set a precedent for everything. So thank you very much for everything and with the staff, and I do look forward to the council's approval of the motion.
Councillor Haslett-Thiel.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. I'm going to support my council colleagues' motion for a couple of reasons. One is protecting our main streets and setting them up for success consistent with the official plan is near and dear to my heart, and they know full well the benefit of the right scale and the right compatibility of buildings on Main Street. And so with that, I'm pleased to support the refusal. I think that it's been given we've received very good delegations tonight. And once again, scale and compatibility are important parts to good land use planning. And this just reinforces it for me. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Council, I would just like to add to what I said a little earlier about this. The regional official plan target related to the mix of new housing development, which is at least 50% of new housing units should be produced in the form of townhouses or multi-story buildings, was also achieved by Oakville at 62.7%. So by any standard, we're getting an A+ here. And the housing mix target was achieved for the 11th straight year. So we don't have to feel an unnecessary sense of pressure from a developer suggesting that we aren't doing enough to support our decision at the region to hold fast on our built boundary. I think that's important for the public to appreciate that we achieve our goals. We just don't do it in necessarily the way some developer may demand. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll? If you wish to vote in support of the motion to refuse, you will say yes. And if you wish to vote against the recommendation to refuse, you will say no. No other answers will be accepted. Madam Clerk.
Councillor O'Meara,
Yes.
Councillor Robertson,
Yes.
Councillor Chisholm,
Yes.
Councillor Giddings,
Yes.
Councillor Haslett-Thiel,
Yes.
Councillor Elgar,
Yes.
Councillor Longo,
Yes.
Mayor Burton,
Yes.
Councillor Noel,
Yes.
Councillor Grant,
Yes.
Councillor Adams,
Yes?
Councillor Lischina,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor Sandhu.
Can you hear me now? Yes.
So it wins.
All right, Council, I declare the motion carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Can we now turn our attention to item 6.3, the public meeting and recommendation report for a temporary use bylaw extension for Acclaim Health and Community Care Services. We have a presentation available from Senior Planner Paul Barrett. And if you who are watching this would like to bring information to council on this file, please call 905-815-6095 to be connected to the meeting. You'll be called upon to speak following the registered delegations. And council, we only have one registered delegation, and that's Ashley Patton from Bousfields, who's only here for questions on behalf of the applicant. Councillor O'Meara.
Your Worship, as this is a renewal of a bylaw that council already passed, Acclaim Health does incredible work. I'd be happy to move the recommendation out the presentation should my council colleagues see fit. I mean, they do great work here, and this is just a renewal of something that this council has already decided on. So happy to make that motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any member of council who objects? Madam Clerk, I don't see one. Shall I put the vote? If you object to the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. Madam Clerk, there's no objection to the motion, and I declare it carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. I'm sure Mr. Barrett, I hope Mr. Barrett appreciates the reprieve in terms of his time. That brings us to item 6.4, the public meeting and recommendation report for the town-initiated official plan amendment concerning Bill 109, More Homes for Everyone Act 2022, with regard to pre-consultations and complete applications for site plan. And we have a presentation from Kirk Bigger, our Manager of Policy Planning and Heritage. And if you would like to contribute your thoughts to this matter and you're watching, you can dial 905-815-6095 to be connected to the meeting. And you'll be called upon to speak following the registered delegations, of which there are none. And as you may have heard earlier in the evening, this is pretty much a conforming to provincial edict exercise. So I'm not sure what one can say unless one wants to say one doesn't like the province's law. Mr. Bigger, we are ready for your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Burton, and through you to council. It's a pleasure to see everyone this evening. And this is a public meeting and recommendation report for town-initiated official plan amendments, number 47 to the Livable Oakville Plan and number 328 to the North Oakville East Secondary Plan. As the Mayor indicated, if you wish to call in, there's the number 905-815-6095. As also indicated, this is implementing a new law under the Planning Act through the Bill 109, More Homes for Everyone Act. This received royal assent in April 14, 2022. The bill made changes to the Planning Act related to zoning, site plan, plans of subdivision, official plans, and official plan amendments, parkland dedication, community benefits charges, and financial tools used in connection with land use planning approvals. Many of the changes to the Planning Act do not require amendments to the town's official plans. In reviewing the changes made through the Planning Act, town staff identified minor technical amendments that should be made to the implementation policies in the town's official plan in regard to the pre-consultation and complete application requirements for site plan applications. The amendments would ensure that the town's current practice requiring pre-consultation and complete applications for site plan applications would continue. As mentioned in the beginning, the town is proposing 2 official plan amendments, OPAs, to implement changes made to the Planning Act, resulting from Bill 109, More Homes for Everyone Act 2022. This received royal assent on April 14, 2022. The official plan amendments to each plan, attached as Appendix A and Appendix B to the staff report, would ensure that the pre-consultation and complete application process for site plan applications will continue as per current town practice. The recommendation before council this evening is to receive the report and to adopt the official plan amendments through the bylaws, OPA 47 be passed, and that OPA 328 be passed, and that notice of council's decision reflect that council has fully considered all written and oral submissions relating to this matter, and those comments have been appropriately addressed. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Bigger. Madam Clerk, do we have any phone-in delegations?
No, we do not.
Thank you. Council, it's decision time. Councillor Elger, thank you. Is there any objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, that's carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Elger. Now we come to the discussion item number 7.1. This is the Midtown Implementation Project Delivery, as the title goes. Neil Garvey, the Commissioner of Community Development, and Phoebe Fu, the Commissioner of Community Infrastructure, are available for questions. There are no registered delegations, and it's not a phone-in item. The motion is that the report be received and the staff proceed with the project delivery model as outlined in the report, and that a capital project be created for Midtown implementation in the amount of $2.5 million to be funded from growth studies development charges of $1.25 million and capital reserve of $1.25 million. And I would note that as a result of the studies, there is, to quote the financial note at the bottom, the capital reserve funding is an interim measure as consideration for additional development charges on a town-wide, regional, and area-specific basis for the implementation of Midtown is anticipated in the future. Are there any questions for the commissioners? Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First question I have is this a new format for the town to make use of for this kind of planning for a development or an area development?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, it is a model that has not been used in Oakville, but has been used successfully in other places.
All right. Sorry, I've got a few questions because I don't recall it being used previously, as you confirmed. A couple of comments in the report talks about infrastructure features and multiple governmental jurisdiction. We certainly understand the multi-governmental jurisdiction in the area. What does it mean by infrastructure features? Is that sanitary and water? Are there other features that we're looking at there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that would include the range of infrastructure, including stormwater, water, wastewater, roads, anything that in the built environment would be included in that, in those terms.
All right, we've got an OPA before us that'll be coming back to this council in the spring of next year in terms of height permissions for the area. Curious as to the timing of this being put into place, as well as the OPA coming back in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of how will this consortium deal with this? So looking at the timeline of it and what we're looking at in terms of infrastructure.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is a two-step procurement process, and it's not a short process. The pre-qualification and the subsequent identification of consortia will take, in our estimation, upwards of 9 or 10 months, and maybe even longer. So we hope to bring back the official plan amendment for Midtown in the early part of next year. So it actually, the award report should either be coincidental or actually follow the approval of an official plan amendment.
All right, so the two are aligned then.
That's correct, and that's why we're bringing this forward now, Councillor, is to make sure that those are sequential as closely as possible.
All right, thank you for that. And I take it that we don't know at this point how long this consortium would be in place. It all depends on how the applications come, the infrastructure is built out, and so on.
That's correct. It's part of the process in identifying the extent of study that needs to happen and the implementation pieces thereof. It could be a short assignment, but more likely it'll be a longer term assignment, but it's not definitive at this point in time.
All right, is this due to staff limitations or staff resources at Town Hall, or is it a combination of that with subject matter experts in terms of some of the other items that we're looking at?
Through you, Councillor, it's a combination of both, and perhaps Commissioner Fu would want to comment on the resourcing aspect of what we're proposing.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Awesome, thank you. In terms of the resourcing, is a combination of actually three things. The first thing is that typically when we develop a major urban center like a downtown core of a municipality, you'll create a brand new team because we're already currently at full capacity in developing the rest of the town. And then when you start creating a downtown, say in Vaughan, in Markham, or in Mississauga, they would have a core team of people that's essentially ranges everything from planners to engineers that only deals with a urban center such as Midtown. We all recognize that Midtown is a large development area and we do want to get them moving. So there are going to be many studies that's required, ranges from environmental assessments all the way to EAs. We currently do not have the capacity to ensure that the Midtown moves smooth in the right pace, in addition to ensuring that we provide the level of service that's required for the rest of the town. So this is the strategy that we developed to complement, to ensure Midtown is implemented in a succinct and timely manner. The second piece is, as per you mentioned, is the expertise. Staff do have the expertise to complete studies for Midtown or complete the EAs or detailed designs and hire the appropriate consultants. But again, in terms of overall volume and scope, it's more appropriate to have a core team that only dedicate to Midtown, and we have to make sure that they're not also putting their attention to other development, but other than Midtown. And actually, the third piece is it's better to have a coordinated approach, and the region also we have met to talk about having a coordinated approach to implement Midtown after all these various studies is done. And having a centralized project manager, as I would call this consortium project group, will help us also make sure that we implement Midtown efficiently.
Thank you, Commissioner. So this is to speed up the process and make it more complete and speed it up so that always concerned about delays on things like this. So this will bring all the various groups and pieces together to allow us to move it forward, correct?
So I think there's a couple of things. There is the aspect of being more efficient in how we deliver the service. There's also the connections that we need to make. And so when you have, as Commissioner Fu articulated, when you have a coordinated approach, the information is seamless. They stay among the team. So it's the product you get has a stronger potential for greater strength, as well as it's a more efficient way to deliver the service.
All right, and when the terms of reference come back, will that include a sunsetting, or will this be renewed for the length of time? It could be decades of building out of Midtown.
So the structure, go ahead, Commissioner Fu, you want to answer this one?
We are putting a box around the scope. The scope will help us with all the studies, the environmental assessments up to detailed design. This is not including helping us construct the actual, say, the town roads or our pedestrian crossings or any other work that is helped to produce, to provide the infrastructure. So recognizing Midtown will take 10, 15, 20 years to really get to that ultimate goal. This is only the initial stage. It is a longer term in the sense of it could be a year or two by the time we start to see the shovel in the ground. But then this scope is purely at the study stage to get us ready to implement, but not the physical implementation and construction. So it wouldn't be a project, I'll say an award that lasts 10, 15, 5 or more than 5 years. So it will be a shorter term, but still longer than a few months.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to my council colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings. Councillor Hazlet-Deal.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. So further to some of the responses Councillor Giddings got, can you just confirm that the team that you referenced includes Oakville planning staff and Oakville development engineering staff, or is the team the consortium that's moving this through? I just don't have enough clarity on that.
If I could refer that question to the CAO.
I did want to add from the previous conversation as well that there actually is this format, although both Neil and Phoebe were not here when we started the Downtown Cultural Hub, is very similar to the Cultural Hub, where we hired a project planner. There were several studies that were undertaken through that project planning firm. This one is slightly different, but a similar kind of process was in place. So I think you saw from the Downtown Cultural Hub that very much planning staff, in that case, the community development, the recreation components were well involved. And so there's a full investment of staff in this program. And the benefit of having a project planner to help us put together the implementation is they add the resources that Phoebe had spoken of and gives us the manpower to move forward. But it is certainly a program that's going to be directed by staff and consulted in the public through staff itself.
Okay, so thank you for that. So from a public consultation perspective, we've been eagerly awaiting for dates on when there might be a further Midtown public consultation. Is this going to be delayed until this process is in place, or will there be further public consultation on the OPA specifically scheduled this fall, or this fall, hopefully?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the work on Midtown, the Midtown plan will continue as proposed. We have that well in hand, and it is intended to be delivered in advance of the likely procurement and securing of the consortia that we're proposing tonight. So the pieces that you're referring to, Councillor Hazlet-Thiel, will continue.
So in terms of the questions that were raised regarding the OPA so far, and I recognize we're in a commenting phase, and you've been encouraging people to send comments in, but will those be addressed again prior to this project planning coercion being put in place?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so there's a couple of components to that. So there's very detailed questions that can only be answered through things like an EA. There's policy questions that most certainly will be addressed as part of this process. So if you're looking at specific locations for a water, wastewater piece of infrastructure, that will wait till the outcome of the EA. But what will be established are things like the road network in policy. The specific location and some of the other engineering details will not be addressed. So to the extent that answers your question, Councillor, I'm happy to answer a follow-up if you have one.
So well, you mentioned the roads. So we have a transportation plan now that you've shared with the public. It's had some iterations over the last few years, but the last one that was sent out, is it potentially going to change, or is it going to be studied for implementation? I just want to get that clarity.
I guess the answer is yes to both, because it's our intention to bring forward the road network as we've proposed it. However, as with any piece of infrastructure, as it's studied, as the EA is implemented, things do shift and change. And perhaps Commissioner Fu wants to augment my answer.
Certainly, through Mr. Chair. The OPA will define the road network. So you will see the schedule, a map of the road network. The OPA will also define the road right-of-way width. So at the level of the OPA, you will get certain amount of details. However, at the level of the EAs and the subsequent detail designs, we will start to look at exactly how we divvy up everything the trees and the street lights, all that type of detail does not fall into the level of OPA. So to Commissioner Neil Garvey's previous point, you'll get both. So prior to the consortiums hired, you will receive a certain level of detail at the OPA level. However, certain comments that are at the detail level that only typically get addressed at detailed design will be addressed through the consortium and the consultants that we hire at that time. So there's just a sequence of events that as we implement Midtown through the variety of studies, certain things will be answers at the appropriate stages.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. So when you mentioned complete planning and urban design studies, I'm particularly wondering about urban design studies. So will this be a part architecture firm, part engineering firm, consortium? Only because a lot of the questions around how we develop Midtown are around urban design. And so is that being outsourced for expertise? And is that part of the terms of reference?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the answer on urban design is that the primary work will be done in-house and coordinated by our staff prior to the approval of the OPA. There may be other details that will look for expertise among the consortia. It will certainly be a component of the expertise that we're seeking. The beauty of the model is that it allows us some flexibility to use or conversely not use that aspect of it. So if we have the capacity to do it and there's an expectation or it can be delivered better by our staff and we have the, like I said, the capacity to deliver it, then that's what we'll do. If there's a specific question about how a particular development is going to relate to the street, then that might be something that we look to our consultants to do to augment the work that we've already done. So it allows us some flexibility to make those determinations as we move along. The bulk of the work will be done through our staff in the current process that we're aiming to deliver by early next year.
So two final questions, if you'll just forgive me. So it talks about support for key stakeholder relations, and it talks about developers, community, Metrolinx. So just further to CAO Closey's comments. So the commitment still is to town staff being front and center, to speaking to the plans and working with the public on Midtown. This isn't outsourced to an external party to do that work?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to get that clarity. And my last question is, if there have been some comments around, sorry, last two questions. If there have been some comments around ensuring that we have greater architectural and urban expertise. So is it your commitment that this consortium will provide that greater, bigger picture vision of the architectural and urban design, notwithstanding the talents within our team, but they will have the resource, if this is put through, to make it a best-in-class facility and neighborhood?
Through Mr. Mayor, the objective is to have that as a component of the expertise that we're seeking. Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. And my last question is, I don't see anything on here, and I really been saying this for Councillor Giddings because he's so terrific about it. The district energy component is not listed as some of the expertise, and yet on build out, and it may be that it's too further down, but Midtown has got lots of potential for district energy, and I'm not seeing it on here. Will it be an element of expertise you're looking for?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the list is not comprehensive, that's for sure. And so we would be looking in the next phase to look and see what value add, and that is a prime one, I think, that we could certainly add to the list of the minimum criteria. I think that's an astute observation. like I said, this is a minimum requirement, and we'd be looking to see what value added beyond what we've identified that a consortia could bring to bear on Midtown.
Well, I know from my personal life, sir, there's an awful lot of really talented, sustainable architecture, engineering firms out there, and I am excited that we will have access to them as a resource. So thank you for bearing with my questions.
Thank you, Councillor. We may have arrived at a decision point. Would one of you two super interested councillors give us a motion? Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel, thank you very much. Is there any objection to Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel's motion? Madam Clerk, there being none, I declare that's carried unanimously. Council, that brings us to 9.1, the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee minutes. We need a mover for receipt of the minutes, and we also need the motion, indicated motion would give approval for the recommendation listed in the agenda. Councillor Giddings, thank you for that. Any objection? Madam Clerk, there being none, that's carried too. Would someone favor us with a motion to rise and report? Councillor Knoll, you anticipated me very well with your reflexes there. Any objection? There being none, that's carried. I rise and report the Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on consent items 4.1 and 4.2, public hearing items 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, and 6.4, discussion items 7.1, and advisory committee minutes 9.1, as noted by the clerk. A mover and seconder for this report would be in order. Councillor Lischina, Councillor Elgar, thank you. Any objection? Madam Clerk, the motion carries and the report and recommendations of the Committee of the Whole are approved. Is there any new business of an emergency, congratulatory, or condolence nature? All right. Then it would be in order for a mover and seconder for consideration and reading of the bylaws. Councillor Chisholm and Councillor Sandhu, thank you. Any objection? There being no objection, the bylaws as listed in the agenda are considered and read. And that ends the work of this meeting. It's been terrific working with you. Thank you very much for all that you brought to the meeting and all the preparation that you did. And we'll see you at the next meeting.